Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. One of the first pieces of text you might see if you come across Carly Pepin's LinkedIn profile is, "Do you feel stuck?" And that, to me, sums up a lot about what Carly Pepin is about. She is a speaker, coach, human behavior specialist, serial entrepreneur, just to name a few things. She likes to help entrepreneurs and people who are feeling stuck, frustrated with their life, their career. She wants to help you to look inward and refocus and get out of that stuck mode. We've all been there. I know I've been there. We've all been there. And now we are here on Mark My Words. How you doing today, Carly?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your life to be here. Appreciate it. And can't wait to get unstuck from the intro and stuck on some good topics. And these are terrible segues. So let me start with what I usually start with, and that is, so you got to this point where you're helping people to look inward and to get out of that rut in their life, in their career. And I'm curious to know, after going to Harvard Business School and DeMartini Institute, which I have no idea where that's even located or what they even specialize in. But I'd be curious to know how you got to this point where you wanted to help people get out of a rut.
Yeah, so it actually just started from my own personal challenge when I had gotten stuck. And this was, it's been like 13, 14 years or something now. But basically, I was living in Los Angeles and I had a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. And I had a perception that it was being driven by it being in that city itself and the individuals who I was surrounded with. And I decided to move to another country. I moved to Australia and I didn't have anyone around me, none of the problems that I labeled as problems. And I realized as I started to feel worse that it wasn't the things on the outside, it was the stuff on the inside. So that's when I really started to study human behavior and I really started to understand why that was occurring, how to overcome it. And I really got hooked pretty fast just with the human behavior dynamic and having my first coach to help me. I shifted my anxiety within a couple months. I almost left Australia, but I wound up staying. It was a really quite inspiring year. And it was cool because when I came back home, I just loved Los Angeles. Like I had realized that it really is one of my favorite places on this planet to be and live. And I absolutely adore it. And it was just everything was on the inside, not the outside. So once I sorted out that, I got to come back home again, in a sense, in both directions, inside and out.
Well, there must be something in the air in Australia because I have had a few entrepreneurs on this show from Australia, and I know there are a lot more out there. What exactly about Australia inspired you
Mhm.
that maybe you weren't getting here in the States?
Again, it was just judgments. So it was all judgments. So it was all perceived judgments where I was labeling that Australians were better than people from LA, but it was all a misperception and all a judgment. As soon as I got there, there's similar challenges there that we have in LA. There's similar things that are supportive. It's all in my head, literally all in my head. So once I cleared that, I can enjoy both places to an equal degree. I actually just prefer LA. It's something that fulfills my purpose to a greater degree. I get more of what I want out of the city, which is quite interesting. Just personal, just something that's unique and personal to me. And yeah, but it was literally just judgments. It was just judgments. But going someplace like that and just stepping so far outside of my own home, away from family, away from friends, just completely disconnecting myself, basically like getting off the grid without getting off the grid, really got me to realize that the challenges were coming from inside of me. It has nothing to do with the place, it has nothing to do with people. It's my own perception of my own existence. So that was, yeah, that was the biggest deal.
That's an interesting
Mm,
perspective because I know some people do move away and go somewhere else and they're like, oh, it doesn't really matter where I am. Whatever the issue is, it's coming from me or somewhere else. And sometimes people do move away and that actually turns out being the right thing. So you really never know. Really, the bottom line,
mhm.
it all starts with you.
Yeah, it all starts with you. And it really all depends on what you want as well. I know a lot of people move out of LA and they're really happy. They want to save the money, they don't want the traffic. I'm kind of just doesn't bother me. Like, it doesn't really bother me to sit in traffic, which is weird. But I was driving and I was stuck in 6 hours of traffic, 3 hours there, 3 hours back. It was like 2 weeks ago. And I was like, I wasn't even annoyed. I know I'm supposed to be annoyed. And I know the world's like, you should hate traffic. But I was like, I don't. I listen to audiobooks. I caught up with friends. I actually quite enjoyed myself. So it really wasn't bad at all. So, I mean, that's the extreme version of getting stuck in kind of the LA traffic dynamics, but it's not that bad for me. And then all the other components.
Definitely love and I truly enjoy. And yeah, even it being expensive, like it doesn't seem like it's expensive to me. It just seems like an opportunity to continue to build and grow my business. And if I'm struggling financially, it's like that extra push to be like, all right, well, how do I increase this month? How do I give more services? How do I create like more complete services, better services? What are my clients looking for? Like to me, the whole city just fuels my business, fuels my creativity. Because if I'm not doing that, then I'm not gonna make enough to thrive there. Like, period. So it's like all the kind of things that frustrate people. I'm like, I'll listen to audiobooks, get stuck in traffic. Yeah, I'll thrive because it's gonna push me to increase my income on a regular basis. You want to live on the beach, you better sort that out financially. Like that's not gonna be an easy task. But then once you get there, you're like, oh, I did it. I'm super grateful. Like, thank you. Thank you for challenging me, Los Angeles.
Yeah, we all have
Uh,
different motivations, and I mean, I would like to think that that's kind of what you're all about as far as like differing perspectives, because we're all
yeah.
different, and we all have different ways of getting ourselves motivated, getting out of a rut, and I'd be interested in knowing after you learned all of that what was the next step as far as okay, I overcame this, I feel great now. Now I want to
Mhm.
help other people get out of their rut. How do you change the
Mhm.
perspective and see it from other people's perspective?
Definitely asking people questions. Like it's really, really important to ask people questions enough to a degree that you understand where they're coming from, what they want, what's important to them. Every person is unique and every person is different. We all have different drivers. So it's making sure I'm asking those quality questions to ensure I know exactly what someone's interested in. And then there's going to be a certain level where people understand, and then there's going to be, we all have noise on what we grew up with, our parents, our teachers, our friends, now it's coworkers, society, all these different dynamics of how life should be, how we should be. So it's also asking questions to make sure we move beyond all the shoulds and find out what someone truly loves, like what's really important to them, and there's really no right or wrong here. Like everyone has different goals and things they would love to achieve. Some people want financial, stability, financial independence. Some people want social recognition, some people want physical attributes and they want that physicality to be perfect in their perception, right? Some people want to focus on their family, some people want to focus on their business. It really doesn't matter. Some people want to focus on spirituality. It's really more like what you love. Like neither one, not any of those are right or wrong. And it's cool because there's 8 billion people on the planet. If we all focused on the same thing, then guess what? It'd be a pretty boring world. I'd be pretty bored if I had to hang out with like 7,999,999,000 more of me. Like,
Yes. No,
I
I
love the
agree.
diversity. Yeah. So let's figure out what you really want. Let's help you be authentic in the world. Let's see if we get that expression because you're basically a part of this like beautiful planet that we have, and your unique contribution and attributes are not only inspiring for you to experience, but it's also inspiring part of our world.
So you're not just
Mhm.
focused on, okay, I want to help people just with one particular problem, like I want them to feel more at peace, or I
Mhm.
want them to attain more career success. You're really just an ear for
Mhm.
whatever issue that they're really focused on. Like you could be
Mhm.
talking to somebody who's money driven 1 minute, and the next minute somebody
Mhm.
who just needs more peace.
Mm. Well, the main thing that I focus on is I focus on individuals who are like entrepreneurs, business owners, founders, people who have a strong desire to make a difference in the world and are utilizing business as a tool. Like we can reach employees via a business, and this is like the snowball effect. Is like every time you build a culture that's inspiring for not just you, but for your employees, that's going to spiral into the rest of their lives because employees who go to work and are more fulfilled, like they're more fulfilled at home, like it just spirals, right? So that's important. But then also the products and services that we provide are also quite important because each product and service that someone's creating has some sort of meaning to someone else or they wouldn't buy it, right? And so it's like how many ways can we add meaning to people's lives, and what's the snowball effect where we can actually impact people in an inspiring way. So I like to focus on those executives, CEOs, and then also like the leadership team as well, because it starts from the top and it starts to trickle its way down. So if they're having personal problems that are impacting day to day in their work, and maybe they're more reactive and they're not able to manage their emotions to a greater degree because some personal problems, we dive in and we work through and relieve that stress. If they're feeling disconnected from the vision of the company, which is really important because it's like when we know what we're doing with the company, like we can share that with those around us. And that's inspiring. It's inspiring to work for someone who has a vision that's greater than just the financial component. That's inspiring. And so it's like when we give people that opportunity to connect with that, because every business owner has that within them, but if they don't know how to find the words to articulate it or how to pull that out of them, they can't share that with the company. And again, this is just a service that we provide to others so that employees can be really fulfilled by what they do because we want to be fulfilled. And being a business owner is not for everyone. And there's nothing, again, there's just nothing wrong with that. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you don't have the purpose behind it, it's like, don't beat yourself up. That person's not better than you. They just have something different inside them that's like a different actual life purpose. And yours is just as valuable in your unique form. So it's like when I talk about it, the only reason I start from the top is to get and trickle it all the way down, right? We only have so much time on this planet. I only have so much time in a day. So it's like, how do I reach the most people? And I was like, all right, let's focus on those humans.
That's a good point because not all of us are meant to be entrepreneurs. Some of us are just really good worker bees, and that's okay. I mean, you're talking to somebody who not only do I have my own show here and have some aspirations to continue growing and do more things down the line, but
Mhm.
I also have a regular day job, and it's a very like, solitary job for the most part. And I feel like I do very well at both, and I'm very happy to
Awesome.
work and do my thing. And I think I'm good at that too. And there is nothing wrong with it. You can get a lot of
Mhm.
fulfillment out of being just a part of the team. So,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to make $100 billion trillion to, uh, not that I know what it's like to have that kind of money, but I'm just gonna take a guess based on how I feel about my life that you don't necessarily need that. And
Yeah.
you can find fulfillment. I mean, I feel like when you feel fulfilled, that is that goes a long way towards having more happiness.
Well, it's kind of like the way that you described it, if we utilize that as well, is you feel wealthy. So even though you don't have that physical financial wealth to the degree of someone else, you still feel wealthy. You don't feel like you're missing anything. And that's what fulfillment really does for us, is it makes us wake up every day and we feel full. We're fulfilled, right? And so we see our wealth and we see that it's come in a different form, and we see that that's something that's inspiring to us. This again is kind of when our life purpose comes into play, is not everyone has a life purpose that revolves around having that cash flow to that degree. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, because if you pay attention to what is true to your life purpose and you're grateful for all the things you have, you'll feel as wealthy as the wealthiest person on the planet. And that's, I would say, the core of what we really want, is we don't want to feel, we don't ever want the thing that we think we want, right? We want, usually it's like what it gives us, like what's the feeling, what's the inspiration, right? When I say I want to live on the beach, I don't want to live on the beach because I feel the need to buy like a fancy house or live next to fancy people. I love the beach because every time I look at it, I get in meditative moments, I get more insights, I get more ahas. And like that's just what the ocean does to me, right? So if I'm going back and forth to the ocean all the time and that's my favorite place to be, I'm like, you know what, one day I'm just gonna live here. Like I'm just gonna wake up, I'm gonna look out the window and I'm gonna make this happen, because this is how valuable this experience is to me, right? And so it's like, ask yourself that question, because it's not usually the actual thing, it's the meaning that it gives behind it. And when we ask ourselves that question, we connect to the true core of who we are, which even me making that statement, it's really important for me, my personal development, my growth, making sure I'm on track, getting those ahas, insights, not just for myself, but for others as well. And if I have that, and the ocean is one of my greatest tools, which it genuinely is, then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to keep that in my life on a day-to-day basis. I'm try to incorporate that to such a degree where I give myself the opportunity to have that day to day. Right. And so I think that's kind of cool. It's like when we think about it, it's like, what's the deeper meaning behind all the things that you're doing? And again, this is like even the questions when I ask business owners and stuff, is like how this spirals into a company. What's the deeper meaning behind what you're creating, the podcast you're creating? Oprah wanted to help people to, I believe I'm going to butcher it a little bit because I don't have it memorized, but it was about using their voice, right? And sharing their message. And what's interesting is she's done like thousands of interviews where she's helped people and created a platform to use their voice and share their message. And she really wanted to inspire others as well. And we could see that her life purpose demonstrates that she's done that. And so it wasn't really that she wanted to have a talk show, that she wanted to have a magazine. It's just these are great platforms. Media is an amazing platform to create a stage for people to share their message, to use their voice. Because growing up, she didn't feel like she had the voice. And so it's really quite inspiring when you see what's behind it. That's the fuel. That's the driver. Making the money wouldn't have been a driver for her, but the money's the bonus that she gets from changing people's lives. And so it's like, that's why we want to ask ourselves the question, what's the real driver behind what we do and what we love? What's really important? Because when you connect with that, you feel quite wealthy. You don't feel like you're missing things, and you're like, I actually have quite a fulfilling, and I'm quite wealthy, my own beautiful form. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my motivation for doing this show was just I wanted to share, not only do I want to share entrepreneurs' perspectives and their visions and inspire people in that way, but I wanted to take my own
Mhm.
experiences because I think deep down inside I always wanted to do something like this, but I didn't really have the self-belief because I had a lot of obstacles in front of me and just didn't think I had the right look, didn't think I had the right sound. And it goes a long way when you have some people just along your journey giving you that little bit of injection of confidence and
Mhm.
reassurance. You can't find everything from within, but uh, it does help. It goes a long way if you think about some of the feedback and some of the other things you're seeing and hearing along the way and saying, wait a minute, maybe this dream is really like a possibility and maybe I can use thing that's really motivating me and making me want to do this, to do something good and to help people, because it always amazes me when people who don't have the kind of obstacles that I've had say, "Oh no, I my voice sounds silly," and et cetera, making excuses. And I know you did a video about imposter syndrome, so this is a good time, I guess, to allude to that. But I had some imposter syndrome, and I see it with other people, and I'm like, oh no, like you have way more of an advantage than even I do. Like, what are you saying? What are you doing? Like, if you want to do something like that, you should do it because you actually have more tools than I do to to do it. Now, that's also selling myself short because here I am. I'm like 100 episodes in. I'm doing something right here and doing a good
Yep.
job. So, there's another dynamic to that. But that's in a nutshell was like my motivation. And imposter syndrome is a real killer.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's when we go out and we compare ourselves to what we think we're supposed to sound like, what we should sound like. I was just working with someone this morning, funny enough, imposter syndrome came in because they're comparing themselves to someone who has like a PhD and they teach in sort of the same platform and arena that she does. And so when we were going through like basically the dynamics of her versus like her teaching versus his teaching, she's far more inspired by her teaching because that individual shows up and they're very certain because they have a PhD and it is what it is, So they're like, and this isn't for everyone, but this is individual. They're like, this is what it is. This is what it is because this is what I know. This is what I have. And I have this PhD. So this is what I know. Or she'll go in and she'll say, I just learned this, but I'm not certain this is accurate. But let's dive in because there's some components that I think are really important and have been really helpful. And I don't know 100% like how much everything is true, but let's dive in and let me get your feedback too. And that becomes a really collaborative environment where it's giving people permission to ebb and flow in learning, which by the way is never ending. Like I still can't imagine like an end point to educating yourself. Like once I learn something, I realize how much more I don't know. And after I realize how much more I don't know, I feel like also 30 other things just came out that day with like new research and education. And I'm like, I can't keep up. So it's really quite interesting because the other dynamic with this too, which is funny, is this unrealistic expectation. Stephen Hawking used to walk into his classroom and he used to tell everyone to wipe everything that they learned clean from him because he discovered something new and he was wrong, and he'll be like, I was wrong. So I discovered something new and now we're going to learn this. And he would just start and he would just teach. And so here's an individual who's like just loving what he does so much that he's not dedicated to being right or wrong, but he's dedicated to creating and finding those answers and sharing that information. And the people who have gone the furthest in life, they inspire us not because they're right or not because they're wrong, but it's the things that they've created as a result of putting in that time and energy and effort. So it's really important to remember that when imposter syndrome comes in and you start comparing yourself, you're basically assuming that you should have the same thing in the same form as someone else. When the reality is you're going to be doing it in your own unique form, right? And this is really important to remember because even that component of just even with you, like when you're like talking about the speech and that different component, but there's a level whenever you're talking about, and you can already tell just by listening to you, when you talk about something that inspires you and that you're connected with, your articulation is clear, it's concise, it's consistent, and it is what it is. So you have nothing missing. You have the same thing as everyone else. And so what gave you that if someone else didn't have it? Everyone has it, and all of us can have amazing articulation. We're amazing speakers. We flow. We're inspiring when we're talking about things that inspire us, period. And some of you guys might be speakers like live, but then for those of you who are like, I can't do it, go look at where you talk to your friends, go look at where you talk to your family, go look at where you're speaking in work and on the specific topics that you just can't shut up about, that you go on about for days, that energize you. And that's all speaking is. That's genuinely all speaking is if you go out and you talked about only those things, Like someone would just think you're the best speaker on the planet because you're inspired and you're alive, and you're sharing about things that you know and you love and you just don't want to stop talking about it. So when imposter syndrome comes in, it's because we think someone has something that like we don't. And so when we go in and we actually find it in our own form, not only become grateful, but we get to utilize it as a tool and a jumping off point to do and achieve something that we would love to in life.
And I'll use myself again as an example. I am completely focused on what I want to accomplish with this show. I am not focused on how anybody else is doing. I only think the best for the outside world. I want nothing but positivity and the best, but I am not sitting around saying, well, this show had this show had that. They're doing better than me. They're doing this. Only like I love doing this and meeting people like you and having these conversations so much that that's really at the end of the day, that's like my biggest focus and just having the best show that I can do. And I don't worry about anything else. I rarely think about, oh man, like I don't know if I can do this or I don't think this is going to be as good. I just I've gotten this far already, so I just kind of keep it rolling and I just try to focus on the good and focus on what I want and need to accomplish. And I don't know what that's worth, but I feel like it brings me more peace than comparing myself.
Yeah, and this is interesting as well because when we start to compare ourselves to other people who are doing same thing or similar thing, and especially if we perceive they're doing better than us, we can get caught in the trap of now trying to mimic them. That's again where imposter syndrome comes in. We're like, they're doing it better, they're doing it this way, so I should as well because they're more successful. They're also successful because they're doing things authentically the way that they would love to do it. And I learned this in the early stages of my business when I was trying to mimic what other people were doing. I was miserable and it just wasn't working. I hated my day to day. I hated what I was doing and my business wasn't building, even though that all these were the time-tested things. So it took a while to realize it wasn't about building a business the way I should build it. There are definitely tools and structures and strategies that stand the test of time that I utilize, but I also make sure that I'm authentically infusing what's important to me to make sure that instead of focusing on other people's goals, it's like I'm focusing on my own. What is my goal? What's important to me? Where do I have a competitive edge that these other people they can't touch? They just can't touch. A big one is the human behavior component. It's huge. So even though like I'm also working with businesses and I'm doing business to business stuff, I have this human behavior edge that's massive that other people in my particular industry they just don't have. Like they don't have the same level of knowledge and understanding around it, and that gives me a massive edge. And the cool thing is I obviously love it. So if I go and I try to focus on being like super corporate in the sense where I have to do only strategy and only this, I actually feel miserable. I am not fulfilled, right? But if I focus on doing it in a way that's inspiring, where I'm infusing human behavior, personal development, leadership, growth, we're utilizing all of that and implementing these strategies at the same time, I thrive. And when I thrive, I'm able to pay attention to the client to a greater degree. I'm more balanced. I'm more objective. I listen to them better. I can integrate things with them to a greater degree. And this is why it's important too to stay focused on what matters to you. You have less noise in your head, and then you can be more objective whenever you're working with many people or one. And it's really cool because, again, it's like you're just focused on what's most inspiring to you. And it's cool too because, you talk about like, we talk about the deeper purpose, the why behind the why. Like, you obviously get so much out of doing this for yourself. But if it was just about you, I wouldn't be on a podcast right now. Like, you just hire me for like coaching or something. But it's also about everyone else getting that same experience, right? Like helping people to learn learn, how to believe in themselves, how to move beyond their own mental limitations. Like you've already shared with me just for this brief period of time what inspires you and like what you want to help others with, and like show them like, hey, you've got a lot to work with. If I can do it, you can do it, right? Like if I can do it, you can do it. And so that's really inspiring because it really does help people. We get so caught up in our own stories, and then when we see other people do it, it's like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it too. Like I can figure this out. And then we start to come up with more strategies and objectives and stuff. And again, if you didn't have that driver and if it was just about you, like it's not, it really isn't as fulfilling. Like not having a service behind your day to day, you feel it. You feel burnt out. You kind of feel exhausted. Like life doesn't feel like it has a lot of meaning to it. And then once you know that you're making an impact, whether it be like even small, could even be with your kids, right? Just small one-on-one with kids versus large, reaching however many people, you really feel more fulfilled. I've not met one person who does not feel fulfillment and inspiration from being of service in the world. And when you can combine what inspires you with being of service, you live a life that you love. You just live, and then you feel the wealth. Even if the financial wealth isn't there yet or it's still growing, you still feel the wealth. And that actually makes it easier to create wealth, by the way.
Well, for
Yeah.
one thing, I don't think I'm egotistic enough to make this all about me. And as much as I wanted to do a show and make content, I knew like one of the biggest obstacles I had to get over was the fact that like, okay, it's okay for me to, have a presence and, to not be so, I guess, bashful about the fact that I am doing this show, if that makes any sense, because you have to have like a little bit of ego or performance in you somewhere to do this.
Mhm.
And I think that's more the angle that I play with it. I mean, obviously, you're getting the real authentic me, but there's a certain mindset that you have to put on when you're like hosting a show. And I suppose it's easier when you have a little more of an ego, which I don't, because there's a lot of times where I'm like, I get
Mhm.
to the end of the show and I'm like, I don't always know how to like end the show. I always prep well to start it because it's about you. It's not about me. But ending it, it's like, well, thanks for listening. Like I don't
Mhm.
know. But ego is definitely not something that is a problem, I don't think. But
This is fun too, because even that dynamic that you're sharing right now, I think people have unrealistic expectations. Well, I know they do. So they have unrealistic expectations on themselves in the sense where they think like you're just showing up and you're just doing it and it's all natural and easy, right? Where right now you're still even thinking about like in this moment, how am I going to end the show? Every time I hear you talking on the back end, my brain's thinking what would be the most valuable information to share simultaneously, right? Like none of this is so pre-planned and in just perfection that we're just sitting here and just flowing back and forth without actually having to think and consider, right? And so it's just, I think it's to remember that like you don't get to see it because it's happening internally, but when we have the opportunity to share it, it's really helpful because there is an unrealistic expectation when people listen to stuff like this that we just have it together and we just know everything all the time, right? Where it's like, okay, well, what story do I want to share now? What do I think would be helpful? How do I add on to that? And all that's going on while you're talking and we're simultaneously doing it at the same time. Like it's a wild ride. And this is happening with us on a regular basis all the time. And that's actually a normal part of life. And it's also quite fun. It's part of what I love about it is you get to be innovative and creative on the spot. There's the ego part, and then we also have the super ego.
yeah,
So
and I
like part
mean,
of our ego is, yeah, I was gonna say part of our ego is like our identity, right? Which isn't actually a bad thing. But if when it gets out of control, that's when we start to get frustrated with others or even ourselves. And that's what like I like to call the super ego. Because the ego is the thing that gives us the opportunity to connect with who we are, which is that speaker, that individual wants to teach and share and learn. The super ego would come on the stage and just like walk up and be like, I'm like the best on the planet. Like, you should listen to me. I'm always right. I'm amazing. Like, that's the super ego. But the universe is designed to humble us when we get a little bit like off our rocker in a sense like that, when we get really proud and puffed up, right? That's when our super ego comes in, and then you'll notice that you'll attract criticism, you'll attract humbling circumstances, which we can often be frustrated for. But in those moments, I like to ask myself, I'm like, all right, I must have been pretty proud or pretty puffed up. Like, why did I just attract that? I could simultaneously being yelled at. Well, I'm in my head, I'm like, where am I really proud right now? Like, I got you, universe. I'm listening. And then humble myself, because if I don't, like, the outside world's going to continue to do it for me. And we all
Yeah,
have those moments. Yeah.
it is very important to listen to what the universe is telling us. And just to quickly talk about superego, I mean, you even know before we started, I had to like, and I do this for just about every episode, I have to like sit here like 4 or 5 minutes before we even connect.
Mhm.
I have to sit here and think about how I'm going to introduce the guests. I'm not here like, oh, this is easy. Like, this is money in the bank. I'm just going
Fine.
to put my feet on the desk and, boom, it just No, it's not,
Mhm.
at least not for me, it's not like that. So, yeah, definitely no super ego or
Mhm.
ego here. And, I know you probably have something else that you want to say about that, which you can, but I also want to ask before we run out of too much time. Uh, really want to get into a little bit about some of the challenges that you have with, uh, like, I guess, what challenges do entrepreneurs bring to
Mhm.
you the most?
Yeah, definitely. So quite often, they want to grow, right? They want to grow, they want to scale, they want to build, and they get really confused on how that's going to occur. And they don't know how to implement it externally, but there's also like a significant quantity of self-doubt internally. And this is where I have certainty, like the two can go hand in hand, right? So when we work on the internal component, again, we're finding the greater driver, the deeper why to why someone's doing it. And then I help to infuse that within the company. We clear the imposter syndrome. Sometimes they might be having challenges like in their life in general. I've had people who have had lawsuits, like theft, who have had problems in relationships, things that are going on with kids that are really hard, stressful, deaths in the family. Like, all these things really distract you and disconnect you from what you're trying to grow and scale within your business, right? So we work on those components as well to release the stress around those so you can refocus on the things that are important, right? Which sometimes is more time in the business, but sometimes it's also, depending on what's occurring, learning how to delegate and manage other individuals so you can step out of the business to focus on that, because sometimes there's a health challenge that comes up. So it really depends on what specifically is like keeping that individual stuck from creating the next most inspiring step. Which, again, scaling business doesn't always mean that you're scaling it to make a lot of money. Sometimes you're scaling it to be able to step out because there's something more important, or sometimes you're scaling it because you want to sell it and you want to utilize that income for the next business because there's a more inspired vision that you have. Like, this is just the stepping stone. So I really like to check in and see what's going on internally with someone to see what their true goals are, their true unique purpose, and then we infuse that in like concrete strategies within the business. We get leadership teams on board so they can get employees on board. And then again, it's just like the snowball effect. And then we just keep going. We just keep the maintenance, we keep it up, and we just keep going and growing and expanding. And the cool thing about this too is I love goals, because not even because they're necessary. I mean, they're necessary in the sense that we love evolving. But like, it's not like we don't even like we achieve a goal and then we're done and we're on to the next goal, right? Like, the journey of getting there is so inspiring. So I love setting these goals because I know the journey for individuals to get there is like one of the most inspiring journeys they're going to go on. And everything that they get to experience, be, and do to get to that goal is like just something that they love. Like that's really important. Then the other dynamic of why it's important, like when we're actually wanting to achieve these goals, is because behind that goal, you might not even see it yet, but there's something else. Like when I say, like, you pick up, you have your phone next to you all the time, not because you need a phone. It's because it has some sort of meaning behind it. That goes for every goal that you set. If you have 1 year goal, 5 year goal, 10 year goals, all those different things, behind every goal, there's additional meaning in your life and a deeper purpose of something that you would love to achieve beyond that, something you want to experience beyond that. And oftentimes, until we actually reach those goals, we don't even get to see and get a glimpse of what that next step is. And life is short. Life is way shorter than we think. And I say this consistently, but like this is it. Like this is the only time I get to be Carly Pepin. I have no guarantees. I don't know if we get reincarnated. I don't know if we don't get reincarnated. I'm gonna imagine you don't remember because there's no memory bank in me. I don't know if I've been here before. I don't know if this is my first time here, my last time here. I have no idea. So it's like, let's figure out how to make the best of the time we have with what we have. And it's like, what do you really want and what do you want to do? How can you give yourself permission to step into that realm? Because even once you get there and you're on the journey, you get more insights into the next thing and next thing. There are things that I have planned now that I never could have even imagined was a possibility until I just started to get started. And then when I kept going, I was like, oh, like there's so much more than I thought. And now I don't want to stop. Now I'm hooked. Now I'm hooked on that journey, right? Like I don't want to stop. And so it's like when we give ourselves permission to do that, everyone has that inside of them. And I don't know what like your thing is, but it'd be super inspiring if you figured it out. And if you do, share it because I love hearing those stories, by the way. Go to my website and send me some info because I absolutely love when people share those stories and tell me like what they're up to and what their unique purpose was, what their vision was, how it kept expanding. When you hear that, it's like, wow, amazing. Thank you for committing to yourself, to your vision, to your goals, to your life.
Yeah, no, and you
Mhm.
said something that made me think of like my very first guest, like 4 or 5 years ago, Scott Stoltz, who him and I had a few conversations about, and I can't quite remember if we probably talked about it in our episode, but
Mhm.
just the idea that we didn't want to look back in our like 30, 40 years and say, ah, I wish I would have, you know, done that podcast or done that thing or, went for that dream that I had when I was much younger and I didn't do it. And I even at this stage in my life, even I look back like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and I'm like, ah, I should have done this or done that or should have done something a little differently. So at this point, I'm like, okay, if my heart, my gut is telling me to do it or to go for it. I really want to not waste too much time. And you got into some topics that we could easily stay on for another hour or two on. I personally, I don't know if I was Mark Schmidt in a past life or two, or if there's parallel universes or whatever, but I feel like to some degree I must have picked this as a life. I feel like I had
Mhm.
to have done that, but that's really getting off on another topic. But yeah, definitely, I'm totally in agreement on if you want to do it and you're feeling it, do it now.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite inspiring because it really is. If it's that meaningful to you, get it done. And then the more that you do something that's meaningful to you, the more inspiration you get from it, the more you feel energized and alive as a result, the more you feel fueled by it, the more you get more insights, creativity to keep it going. And that's the stage where you're going to be the most successful. The things that are most inspiring to you is where you're most successful because you don't want to give them up. The things that you're procrastinating on, hesitating on, are things that are not inspiring to you, and you actually do give them up. And funny, like even just in a practical manner, how you could see something like this, again, just working with a different client today, procrastinating on building their website and their brand, but they get all the ideas and insight, beating themselves up for not building the website and like the new logo and all that stuff. And I was like, and I just looked at him and I was like, why are you expecting yourself to do that? Like, why are you not hiring someone? Would you rather do it yourself or hire? And she's like, I would love to hire someone. And I was like, well, that's why you're not doing it, because you actually don't want to do it yourself. You genuinely want to hire someone to do it, and you're thinking you're supposed to do it. So instead of just like getting those insights, writing them down and compiling them for the future person that you delegate this to, you're just sitting there beating yourself up all night for not doing it yourself. And I'm like, let's stop wasting your time. So we procrastinate on things that are not inspiring to us, right? And then we actually fulfill and move forward on things that are. So this person's inspired to build a brand, but they're not inspired to create the material and do any of those other components. And here's the cool thing about delegation, you guys, is that someone out there on this planet, and a lot of you guys who are listening, are graphic designers, are web designers, and love doing it. And so let's not have us waste our time doing things we don't love and delegate it to people who are genuinely inspired to do it. Because then it's a fulfilling, mutual, beneficial relationship. It's a win-win. You're paying someone to do what they love, to deliver a product that you love, and vice versa. So it's really cool. So pay attention to those subordinations. Think about the things that you're like hesitating, procrastinating on. Can you delegate it? If you can't, if it needs to be done, like how can you like encourage yourself to create a way to actually do it if it's necessary? There's certain things that are necessary in life. And then also, can you drop it? Sometimes we can just drop it and it's not that big of a deal, right? So it's really paying attention to those particular things, because if you're just focused every day on what you love the most, you are just going to be energized, alive, inspired. And no matter what happens, I know you're going to move through it and get to the other side of the challenge, because you don't want to let go. You will not let your life purpose go. Once you connect with it, once you connect with that inner driver, once you connect with that why, nothing can stop you. Nothing can make you walk away from that, no matter what that is. And again, we're speaking it in a very nebulous form, but there are just infinite ways that that can come forward. So it's paying attention to what's most inspiring to you, and dedicating your life to it.
That is such a good point. I mean, I know there are things that I don't like to do that are associated with creating a show like this. Some of those things are things I'm personally thinking about whether I need to delegate or maybe hire somebody. Some of those things are things that I just said, you know what? I'm going to drop them, and there is not important at this time. And I'm just basically speaking to your point that those are things that you have to consider. And I think when it comes to just the heart of an idea, if you're really feeling it and you're really passionate about it, one way or another, you just gotta plow through and just do it. Because if you just hem and haw over it, you're never going to get anywhere. Like, I'm still thinking about the book and the script that I thought about writing all the way back in high school. That's probably almost about 30 years ago. I was starting to think about that mid 90s, like getting into my senior year in 97. And I kind of started on it, but then life got in the way and whatever. That's obviously, somebody could easily say, well, that's an excuse. It kind of is. But I mean, my point being, you just gotta at least try it, which I did, and I haven't gone back to it, haven't even thought about it. So maybe that has been fulfilled. I don't know. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
just kind of rambling now, but
No, it's actually a great example, because my husband, he's a writer. I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a writer to the same degree. I love speaking, but you'll find him, he's got like a dozen books on the back end that he's simultaneously writing. That's not me. I love speaking. I don't actually want to sit and write. I'd rather be on this podcast with you. And then I'd rather take 100 podcasts, give it to a ghostwriter and say, write a book about this topic, listen to all this stuff and make it happen. That's how I'd love to write a book. That sounds inspiring to me. But sitting down and taking out 2, 3, 4 hours of my day, I love how I spend my day. I love this dynamic. I love speaking. I love being asked quality questions that make me think differently, that make me kind of pull up answers, explain things in a different way. This is highly valuable for me. Why would I walk away from this to write a book because someone says I should? Okay, well, if that's a great marketing tool, then how do I make that happen? Again, ghostwriters, send all of my podcasts to people, tell them this is the topic that I would love. Let me know if you have any questions, get me a draft, we'll review it, and then we'll go from there. So it's like, what is really important to you? What's inspiring, and creating that and crafting it in a way that works for you. Whereas my husband, he's the opposite, and he could be writing right now. As we speak, he might be sitting down adding to one of his dozen books.
Yeah, I guess the lesson for me is that maybe I've changed a lot since the
Yeah.
90s, which I'm sure I have. It's been a minute. Or, maybe I just wasn't a writer after all, because I love doing this. So, I
Speaker.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm about 100 episodes in at this point,
Yeah.
whereas I haven't even finished a book or a script. I've barely scratched the surface. So maybe all of that is telling me more than I realize. But
Yeah. That you love speaking, and that's more valuable to you than the writing. Yeah.
well, before we run out of time here, I want to give you an opportunity to tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work
Yeah.
with you, and anything else you want to add.
Yeah, so definitely head over to my website, which is Pepin.com, and then you can reach out to me directly there or connect with me on any social media platform as well. Yeah. And if you connect with me on social media, like give me a heads up, like on Facebook or something, like if or LinkedIn, if it's on a podcast, sometimes you get some weird requests and I'm like, so just reach out, DM me.
Also, find Carly's
Uh,
YouTube page because there's a lot of good material and helpful hints there. I really enjoyed listening to some of your sound bites and videos. So,
Thank you.
yeah, that's my advertisement for you as well. So, I I I think we're just about out of time here. So, speaking to earlier, the whole wrapping up an episode is always a bit of a challenge. But Carly Pepin, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And yeah, again, Carly Pepin, and I will just do the same little rundown. Speaker, coach, human behavior specialist, serial entrepreneur, SoCal yogi, etc., etc. You brought a lot to the table today. Thanks for being on Mark My Words. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.